They thought she was trash. They thought she was just a stepping stone, a quiet, obedient wife they could use up and toss aside when her usefulness ran dry. Gregory Dalton and his ruthless mother didn't just divorce Samantha. They erased her. They threw her out onto the street in the dead of winter, with nothing but the clothes on her back, laughing as they locked the gates of the mansion she had polished for 10 years. But they made one fatal calculation. They forgot to check who she really was. They didn't know that the name on her birth certificate wasn't just a name. It was a death sentence for their entire empire. When the judge read it aloud, the silence was so loud it shattered their lives. The snow was falling in thick, wet clumps, sticking to the wrought iron gates of the Dalton estate like bandages on a wound. It was typical New York weather for late January, unforgiving, bitter, and grey. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the glacial atmosphere inside the mahogany-panelled library where Samantha Dalton stood, shivering not from temperature, but from shock. "It's done, Samantha. Don't make a scene," Gregory said. He didn't even look up from his phone. He was scrolling through something, probably stock prices, or perhaps messages from Brittany, the 23-year-old receptionist he had been mentoring for the past 6 months. Samantha stared at him. She was 32, but in that moment, she felt ancient. 10 years. She had given him 10 years. She had dropped out of art school to support him while he finished his MBA. She had worked double shifts at a diner to pay for his suits so he could look the part of a successful broker before he actually was one. She had nursed his mother, Lucille, through a hip replacement and a bout of pneumonia that nearly killed the old woman. "Gregory," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you can't just tell me to leave. This is my home." "Was," a sharp voice cut in from the corner. Lucille Dalton sat in her high-backed velvet chair, sipping tea from a cup Samantha had hand-washed that morning. The older woman's eyes were hard, glittering with a malice she had barely bothered to conceal for the last decade. "It was your home, dear. But let's be honest, you never really fit the furniture, did you? You were a placeholder. A sturdy, reliable placeholder, until Gregory was ready for the real thing." Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. "A placeholder?" "I'm his wife, Lucille. I scrubbed your floors. I cooked your meals." "And you were compensated," Gregory said, finally looking up. His handsome face, once the center of Samantha's world, now looked like a mask of indifference. He slid a check across the antique desk. It slid over the polished wood and stopped at the edge, teetering. $5,000, Gregory stated. "That's plenty for a fresh start. Consider it severance pay. The prenup is ironclad, Sam. You get what you came in with, which, if I recall, was a suitcase full of rags and a rusted Honda." "I signed that prenup because I trusted you," Samantha cried, tears finally spilling over. "You said it was just to protect your family's business, that it wouldn't matter because we were partners." "Business is business," Gregory shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. "And honestly, Sam, look at you. You're tired. You've let yourself go. Brittany brings an energy to my life that I need. She understands the corporate world. She fits the image of a CEO's wife. You? You're still just the waitress I met at the diner." Lucille set her cup down with a sharp clink. "The guards will escort you out in 10 minutes. Take your personal effects. Leave the jewelry. Gregory bought that, so it's family property. Leave the car keys. The lease is in the company name. And for heaven's sake, don't take any of the silverware." The cruelty was breathtaking. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an eviction of her soul. Samantha looked at the check, $5,000. It wouldn't even cover first and last month's rent in a decent apartment in the city. "You're throwing me out?" she asked, her voice trembling with a rage she didn't know she possessed. In a blizzard? With nothing? You have legs, Lucille sneered. Use them. Samantha reached out, her hand hovering over the check. Then, with a sudden surge of dignity, she swatted it off the desk. It fluttered to the floor, landing near Gregory's Italian leather loafers. I don't want your money, Samantha said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. And I don't want your pity. But remember this, Gregory. You built this life on my back. You think you're standing tall, but you're standing on a foundation that I poured. When I leave, I take my luck with me. Oh, spare us the melodrama, Gregory laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Get out, Sam, before I have security drag you. She turned and walked out. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't take the coat Gregory had bought her for Christmas. She walked to the coat closet, grabbed her old, worn denim jacket, the one she had when she met him, and stepped out the front door. The wind hit her like a physical blow. The snow blinded her. As she walked down the long driveway, the heavy iron gates began to close automatically behind her. She heard the distinct click of the lock engaging. She was alone. No car, no money, no home. Just the biting cold and the echoing laughter of the man she had loved more than life itself. But as Samantha trudged toward the main road, fighting the hypothermia that was already nipping at her fingers, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about a phone number. A number she had memorized 20 years ago and promised herself she would never, ever call. She reached into her pocket. She still had her phone. Gregory hadn't taken that, likely because it was an older model and not worth his time. Her fingers were stiff, but she dialed. It rang once, twice. The offices of Kensington and Wright, a crisp, professional voice answered. How may I direct your call? Put me through to Harrison, Samantha said, her teeth chattering. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Kensington does not take unsolicited calls. If you would like to schedule— Tell him, Samantha interrupted, looking back at the Dalton mansion looming on the hill. Tell him his daughter is ready to come in from the cold. For 3 weeks, Gregory Dalton felt invincible. The divorce proceedings were moving faster than a freight train. His lawyer, Arthur P. Grimshaw, a man known in legal circles as the Shark of Manhattan, assured him it was an open and shut case. Samantha had no assets, no high-powered counsel, and the prenup was watertight. Gregory spent his days finalizing the merger between his company, Dalton Tech, and a massive conglomerate, and his nights wining and dining Brittany at the city's most exclusive spots. Life was an upgrade in every sense. You look tense, babe, Brittany purred one evening, tracing the rim of her martini glass. They were at Le Bernardin, sitting at the best table in the house. Just anticipation, Gregory smiled, though his stomach was in knots. The merger was the biggest deal of his life. If it went through, he wouldn't just be rich, he would be wealthy. The shareholders are meeting next week. Once the divorce is finalized on Friday, I'm a free man with a clean slate. The board loves stability, and getting rid of the dead weight was actually a recommendation from the consultants. Dead weight, Brittany giggled. She really was, wasn't she? I saw a picture of her. So, plain. She served a purpose, Gregory said dismissively, but you don't keep the training wheels on when you're ready to ride the Ducati. Whatever guilt Gregory might have felt was easily washed away by the validation of his mother, Lucille. She called him daily to congratulate him on reclaiming the family dignity. To them, Samantha had just been a temporary employee who had overstayed her contract. Meanwhile, across the city, Samantha was living a very different reality. She wasn't staying at the plaza, and she wasn't in a penthouse. Not yet. She was staying in a small, nondescript guest room in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It was comfortable, warm, and smelled of old books and lemon polish. Sitting across from her was Henry Cole. He wasn't a flashy lawyer. He wore a cardigan, looked like a kindly grandfather, and worked out of a small office that smelled of pipe tobacco. But anyone who knew the real history of New York law knew that Henry Cole didn't lose. He didn't argue cases, he dismantled them. They filed for an expedited hearing, Henry said, sliding a thick document across the coffee table. Friday at 9:00 a.m. Judge Patterson is presiding. He's a tough old bird, usually favors the breadwinner. Grimshaw is counting on you not showing up, or showing up with a public defender who hasn't had time to read the brief. Samantha stared at the paperwork. They listed irreconcilable differences and failure to contribute to marital assets. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Failure to contribute. I managed the household accounts. I introduced him to the investor that saved his company in 2018. Remember Mr. Henderson? I was the one who charmed him at the charity gala while Gregory was too drunk to speak. We know, Samantha, Henry said softly. But in the eyes of the court, without documentation, that's just hearsay. The prenup waives your right to spousal support unless we can prove duress or fraud. I don't want support, Samantha said, her eyes flashing with a steeliness that reminded Henry vividly of her father. I want justice. I want them to understand that they didn't just discard a wife. They discarded the only thing protecting them. Henry smiled, a slow, dangerous curling of his lips. I spoke to your father this morning. Samantha stiffened. And? He's eager. He wanted to buy the bank holding Gregory's mortgage and foreclose immediately. I told him to wait. That's too easy. It's too quick. Henry leaned forward. We have something better. I've been digging into Dalton Tech's financials. Gregory has been sloppy. Arrogant men usually are. He's been leveraging assets he doesn't fully own to push this merger through. The warehouse on 5th? Samantha asked. Exactly. And the patent for the new software algorithm. He listed them as sole property of Dalton Tech. Samantha's brow furrowed. Aren't they? Technically, yes, Henry said. But the original funding for those assets came from a distinct trust, a silent angel investor, back when the company was a garage startup. Do you remember who signed the check for the seed money? Samantha closed her eyes, thinking back to those days of ramen noodles and late nights. It was the Artemis Group. Gregory said it was some venture capital firm. The Artemis Group, Henry nodded, a shell company, wholly owned by a blind trust. He paused for effect. A trust established in 1993. The beneficiary of that trust is you, Samantha. The room went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to boom. Me? Samantha whispered. Your father set it up when you ran away from home to be with Gregory. He couldn't stop you, and he knew you wouldn't take his money directly. So, he funneled it into Gregory's business so you wouldn't starve. Gregory Dalton doesn't own his company, Samantha. In a roundabout way. You do. Samantha sat back, the breath leaving her lungs. For 10 years, Gregory had strutted around like a king, claiming he was a self-made man, belittling her for her lack of ambition. All the while, he was spending her money. His success was literally her inheritance. Does he know? She asked. No. And neither does Grimshaw. They think the Artemis Group is just a silent partner they can buy out after the merger. Henry closed the folder. On Friday, we aren't just going to contest the divorce. We're going to audit the marriage. He humiliated me, Henry, Samantha said, her voice trembling with a mix of grief and fury. He threw me in the snow like garbage. Then on Friday, Henry said, standing up and offering her a hand, we will bury him in an avalanche. Friday morning arrived with a leaden sky. The Superior Court of New York was buzzing. The divorce of Gregory Dalton, the rising tech star, was minor news, but the presence of Arthur P. Grimshaw ensured a gallery full of legal interns and curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the shark devour a helpless victim. Gregory arrived in a charcoal Armani suit, looking every inch the victor. Lucille was on his arm, draped in furs, looking at the courtroom benches with disdain. Brittany was there too, sitting in the second row, trying to look demure in a navy dress that was slightly too tight. "She's late," Gregory muttered, checking his Rolex. It was 8:58 a.m. "Probably couldn't afford the subway fare," Lucille snickered. "Don't worry, darling. If she's a no-show, we get a default judgment. It's even better." Grimshaw, a man who looked like a bulldog in a pinstripe suit, leaned over. "If she does show up, don't say a word, Gregory. Let me handle the theatrics. We'll paint her as a gold digger who contributed nothing." At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the heavy oak doors swung open. The room didn't go silent immediately. It was a gradual hush, starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave. Samantha walked in. She wasn't wearing the rags they expected. She wasn't wearing the cheap department store suit she used to wear to church. She was wearing a tailored white power suit that cost more than Gregory's car. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was sleek, straight, and shining. She wore dark sunglasses, which she removed slowly as she walked down the center aisle. But it wasn't her appearance that caused the stir. It was the man walking beside her. Arthur Grimshaw's jaw literally dropped. He nudged Gregory violently. "Is that Henry Cole?" "Who?" Gregory asked, oblivious. "Henry Cole," Grimshaw hissed. "He hasn't taken a divorce case in 20 years. He represents royalty. He represents nations. Why is he walking with your wife?" Samantha took her seat at the defendant's table. She didn't look at Gregory. She didn't look at Lucille. She pulled out a fountain pen and placed it on the table with a precise, deliberate click. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Patterson entered, looking bored. "Docket number 40492, Dalton versus Dalton. Let's make this quick. I have a full schedule." Grimshaw stood up, smoothing his jacket. "Your Honor, Arthur Grimshaw for the plaintiff. My client seeks a dissolution of marriage based on the pre-nuptial agreement signed 10 years ago. We are also asking for a dismissal of any alimony claims, citing the defendant's lack of contribution to the marital estate." The judge looked at Henry Cole. "And for the defense?" Henry stood slowly. He didn't smooth his jacket. He didn't posture. "Henry Cole for the defendant. And, Your Honor, we are filing a counter-motion." "A counter-motion?" Judge Patterson raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds? The prenup is standard." "We are not contesting the prenup, Your Honor," Henry said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "We are enforcing it. Specifically, the clause regarding the division of assets acquired independently of the marital union." Gregory whispered to Grimshaw, "What is he doing? I have all the assets." "Shut up," Grimshaw whispered back, sweat beading on his forehead. "Go on, Mr. Cole," the judge said. "My client," Henry continued, gesturing to Samantha, "was removed from the marital home 3 weeks ago without resources. The plaintiff claimed that the home, the cars, and the business, Dalton Tech, were his sole property. However, we have evidence that suggests a significant fraudulent misrepresentation of asset ownership." "Objection!" Grimshaw roared. "This is a fishing expedition. Gregory Dalton built that company from the ground up." "With whose money?" Henry asked sharply. "Venture capital," Gregory shouted, unable to help himself. "The Artemis Group." Henry smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had just cornered a rabbit. "Exactly. The Artemis Group. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit A, the incorporation papers of the Artemis Group. Henry walked to the bench and handed a file to the judge, then dropped a copy on Grimshaw's table. Grimshaw opened it. His face went pale. He looked at the paper, then at Samantha, then back at the paper. "Read the name of the sole beneficiary, Counselor," Henry said. Grimshaw swallowed hard. "Samantha Kensington." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. "Kensington," Lucille whispered loudly. "Like the hotel chain. The bank." "Like Harrison Kensington," Henry corrected, turning to face the gallery. "The industrialist." Gregory looked like he had been hit by a truck. "What?" "No. Sam's last name is Hayes. She's a nobody from Ohio. Her mother's maiden name was Hayes." Samantha spoke for the first time. Her voice was crystal clear. "I used it because I wanted to know if a man could love me for me, not for my father's billions." "I got my answer, Gregory." The judge was reading the documents with wide eyes. "Mr. Grimshaw, this document shows that the Artemis Group provided 85% of the initial funding for Dalton Tech. It also states that the funding was a conditional loan, callable at any time by the beneficiary." "Callable," Gregory choked out. "It means," Henry said, turning to Gregory, "that you owe the Artemis Group, and by extension, Samantha, $12 million plus interest, immediate payment, or under the terms of the loan, forfeiture of all IP and physical assets." "This is insane." Gregory stood up, his face purple. "She's lying. She served coffee. She doesn't know anything about business." "Sit down, Mr. Dalton," the judge barked. "But wait, there's more," Henry said, holding up a finger. "Since you evicted the beneficiary from her home, you violated the good faith clause of the investment agreement, which triggers a penalty clause." Henry turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we move to freeze all assets of Dalton Tech and Gregory Dalton personally, pending a forensic audit. We also move to invalidate the NDA regarding the upcoming merger, as the primary stakeholder, Mrs. Dalton, was not consulted." "Merger?" The judge looked at Gregory. "You were selling a company you didn't fully own?" "I own it," Gregory screamed. "She's just a wife. She's nothing." "She," Henry said, his voice booming now, "is the woman who paid for your suits. She is the woman who paid for your office, and she is the woman whose name you just dragged through the mud." "I grant the motion." Judge Patterson slammed his gavel. "Assets frozen immediately. Mr. Dalton, you are not to leave the jurisdiction. Mr. Grimshaw, get your client under control." The courtroom erupted. Reporters were frantically typing on their phones. Lucille Dalton had slumped in her seat, clutching her pearls, looking as if she might faint. Brittany had already stood up and was edging toward the exit, realizing the gravy train had just derailed. Gregory stood there, shaking. He looked at Samantha. For the first time in years, he really looked at her. He saw the power in her posture, the cold intelligence in her eyes. "Sam," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Sam, we can talk about this." "Baby, please." Samantha stood up. She smoothed her white jacket. She looked him in the eye, and the entire room held its breath. "You're right, Gregory," she said. "The prenup is ironclad. You leave with what you came in with." She paused, glancing at his expensive watch. "Actually, I paid for that watch. Take it off." The walk from the courtroom to the parking lot felt like a funeral procession for Gregory Dalton's life. The press, usually uninterested in the divorce proceedings of mid-level tech CEOs, had been tipped off. The name Kensington had gone out over the police scanners and court blogs like a distress flare. By the time Gregory pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse, a wall of flashbulbs blinded him. "Mr. Dalton, is it true you tried to defraud Harrison Kensington's daughter? Did you really throw her out in a blizzard? Gregory, are you insolvent?" The questions were like darts. piercing the armor of arrogance he had worn so comfortably just an hour ago. Beside him, Lucille was using her crocodile skin handbag to shield her face, muttering curses about vultures and low-class peasants. Arthur Grimshaw, the shark, was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out the back entrance the moment the judge pounded the gavel, realizing that a frozen client was a non-paying client. Gregory pushed through the crowd, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached his Aston Martin, fumbling for the keys. He needed to get to the office. He needed to fix this. It was just a misunderstanding, a leverage play. He could smooth it over. But when he slid into the driver's seat and turned the ignition, the engine sputtered and died. The dashboard lit up with a singular, terrifying message. Remote disable. Contact lender. No, Gregory hissed, jamming the start button again. No, no, no. What is it? Lucille shrieked from the passenger seat. Start the car, Gregory. These people are touching the windows. They killed the car. Gregory stared at the dashboard in horror. The lease. It's under the company name. The assets are frozen. They had to take a taxi. The ride to Dalton Tech was silent, filled only with the heavy breathing of two people watching their world collapse in real time. When they arrived at the glass and steel tower in Midtown, Gregory didn't even wait for his change. He sprinted into the lobby, ignoring the startled look of the security guard, a man named Ralph, whom Gregory had never bothered to greet in 5 years. "Mr. Dalton? Wait," Ralph called out, stepping out from behind the desk. "Access has been restricted." Gregory spun around, his face flushed. "Restricted? I own this building. I am the CEO." "Not as of 20 minutes ago, sir," Ralph said, looking uncomfortable but firm. "We got a call from the receivership court. A Mr. Henry Cole sent over a writ. No one enters the executive suite without a federal monitor present. Your badge has been deactivated." Gregory stared at the turnstiles. The little light on the scanner was a solid, unyielding red. He looked around the lobby. Employees were whispering, glancing at him over their lattes. He saw the pity in their eyes, or worse, the amusement. They knew. The email had probably already gone out. "Fine," Gregory spat, straightening his jacket. "I'll work from home. I have the merger call at 2. I don't need this office." But the nightmare was only beginning. By the time Gregory and Lucille returned to the mansion, via a second taxi that Gregory had to pay for with the crumpled cash he found in his pocket because his corporate Amex had been declined, the reality of the freeze was setting in. The mansion was eerily quiet. Usually at this hour, the housekeeper, Maria, would be vacuuming, or the cook would be prepping lunch. "Maria," Lucille called out, dropping her furs on the entry bench. "We need tea, and something strong for Gregory." Silence. They walked into the kitchen. It was empty. On the marble island sat a neat pile of keys and a note. Lucille snatched it up. "Mrs. Dalton," the agency called. They said the automatic payroll deposit for this month was reversed due to insufficient funds. "We have been instructed to cease work immediately. We have taken the liberty of clearing out the perishables as payment for the last week." Maria Lucille stared at the empty refrigerator. "They took the truffles? They took the champagne? They took the staff, Mother," Gregory said, sinking onto a bar stool. He put his head in his hands. "It's over. The merger Sterling won't sign if the assets are frozen. The deal is dead." "Don't you dare say that," Lucille snapped, her survival instincts kicking in. "You are a Dalton. We do not lose to trash like Samantha. She's bluffing. She wants you back, that's all. This is a tantrum, a very expensive tantrum. She's a Kensington mother. Do you know what that means?" Gregory looked up, his eyes wild. "It means she has more money in her checking account than my company has in total valuation. She doesn't want me back. She wants to crush me." His phone rang. It was the only thing still working, likely because the bill wasn't due until the next day. The caller ID showed Sterling Enterprises, CEO office. Gregory took a deep breath. He had to charm his way out of this. He had to be the salesman. "Mr. Sterling?" Gregory answered, forcing a laugh. "I assume you've heard the rumors. Just a little legal hiccup with the ex-wife, standard divorce leverage, nothing that affects the IP or the—" "Gregory!" The voice on the other end was like liquid nitrogen. "I'm not calling about rumors. I'm calling because I just had lunch with Harrison Kensington." Gregory's blood ran cold. "Harrison is an old friend of my father," Sterling continued. "He showed me some interesting documents, specifically regarding the ownership of the code you're trying to sell me. It seems you didn't write the core algorithm, Gregory. Your wife did." "That's a lie," Gregory stammered. "She's an art school dropout. She has a degree in mathematics from MIT under her maiden name, Gregory. She dropped out of art school to hide from the press. She wrote the code. The timestamps on the original repository match her personal laptop, which her lawyers have just submitted into evidence." There was a long pause. "You tried to sell me stolen goods," Sterling said quietly. "My lawyers are drafting a suit for bad faith negotiation. Expect to be served by morning. Do not contact me again." The line went dead. Gregory dropped the phone. It clattered onto the expensive Italian tile. "What did he say?" Lucille asked, her voice trembling. "Sam wrote the code," Gregory whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He thought back to those later nights in the apartment, him complaining about the bugs in the software, her looking over his shoulder, pointing at the screen, saying, "Maybe if you move that bracket there, or change the variable loop." He had thought she was just guessing. He had thought she was just lucky. She had been fixing his incompetence for 10 years. "She played us," Lucille hissed. "The little witch played the long game. We have to fix this." Gregory stood up, pacing the kitchen. "We need money. Cash. We need to hire a new lawyer. Someone who isn't afraid of the Kensingtons. We need to fight the freeze." "I have my jewelry," Lucille said, clutching her pearls. "And the artwork." "The artwork is insured under the company policy," Gregory said. "We can't sell it. But the jewelry, yes. Gather it up. We'll go to the broker on 47th Street. It was a desperate, humiliating plan, but it was all they had. An hour later, Lucille Dalton, the queen of high society, walked into a pawn shop. She called it a secondary market broker, with a velvet bag full of diamonds. The broker, a man with a loop stuck permanently to his eye, dumped the contents onto the felt tray. He picked up the heavy diamond necklace Gregory had given Lucille for her 60th birthday. He examined it. Then he picked up the sapphire ring, then the emerald brooch. He put the loop down and looked at Lucille with a bored expression. "I can give you $400 for the gold weight," he said. Lucille gasped. "400? These are worth 50,000. That necklace is a Vancroft." "It's a replica," the broker said flatly. "High-quality cubic zirconia, set in 14-karat gold plating. All of it. Paste." Lucille turned slowly to Gregory. "Gregory, you bought these? You told me they were investment pieces." Gregory's face was the color of ash. He remembered the years of tight budgets, the years he needed to look rich while actually drowning in debt. He had bought the fakes to keep his mother happy, to keep up appearances, telling himself he would replace them with real ones once the company took off. He had never gotten around to it. I had cash flow issues," Gregory mumbled. Lucille didn't scream. She didn't yell. She simply walked over to her son and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the small, dusty shop. "You are a failure," she whispered, "and you have dragged me into the gutter with you." They walked out of the shop with nothing. The snow had started to fall again, covering the city in white. But this time, they weren't the ones inside the warm mansion looking out. They were on the street, and the cold was biting deep. Desperation makes people do dangerous things. For Gregory Dalton, stripped of his fortune, his car, and his dignity, the only currency he had left was his voice. If he couldn't beat Samantha in the courtroom, he would destroy her in the living rooms of America. It was Brittany who gave him the idea, ironically, just before she dumped him. She had met him at a coffee shop. He couldn't afford dinner, to return his spare apartment key. "You're trending, Greg," she said, looking at her phone, "but not in a good way. Everyone is calling you the Ice King because of the blizzard thing. But people love a redemption arc, or a victim." "I am the victim," Gregory insisted, grabbing her hand. She pulled it away. "She lied to me for 10 years. She pretended to be poor. That's fraud." "So say that," Brittany said, standing up. "Go on TV. Cry. Say she manipulated you. Say she was a spy for her father the whole time, trying to steal your ideas. People hate billionaires, Greg. Play the underdog. She left him with the bill for 2 lattes, which he paid with the last of the cash from his pocket. But the seed was planted. 2 days later, Gregory sat in the studio of The Morning Truth, a tabloid talk show known for its sensationalism. The host, a man named Chip Darrow, leaned in with faux sympathy. "So, let me get this straight, Gregory," Chip said to the camera. "You marry a woman you think is a struggling waitress. You support her. You build a life. And the whole time she is secretly the heiress to the Kensington Empire, spying on your tech company?" "It broke my heart, Chip," Gregory said, looking into the camera with practiced sadness. "I loved Samantha. I didn't care about money, but she was taking notes. She was feeding my proprietary data to her father's conglomerates. And when I confronted her, when I asked for a divorce because I couldn't handle the betrayal, she used her father's lawyers to freeze me out. She threw me out. And the story about her being kicked out in a blizzard? Fabricated," Gregory lied smoothly. "She took a private car. She staged that photo of her walking in the snow. It's all a PR stunt to ruin a self-made man." The interview aired live. In the brownstone in Brooklyn, Samantha watched the screen, her face impassive. Henry Cole sat beside her, jotting notes. "He's good," Henry admitted. "Lying through his teeth, but he's selling it. The social media sentiment is shifting. People are calling you a corporate spy." Samantha took a sip of tea. He forgot about the security system. "The one at the mansion?" "Gregory was always so proud of his smart home," Samantha said, a cold smile touching her lips. "He installed cameras everywhere. The driveway, the library, the porch. He wanted to monitor the staff, but he forgot that I was the admin for the cloud account." "You have the footage?" Henry asked. "I have everything. Him laughing, Lucille checking her watch, me begging, the gates locking behind me." Samantha set her cup down. "And I have something else, audio from the library." "Release it," Henry said. "Not to the court, to the internet." Within an hour, the narrative didn't just shift, it capsized. Samantha didn't go on a talk show. She simply posted a single video file to a new Twitter account with the handle, "Or the Real Samantha." The caption was 3 words: "The truth about winter." The video opened with the time-stamped security footage. The resolution was 4K. It showed Samantha, tear-streaked and shivering, standing before Gregory and Lucille. The audio was crystal clear. "Lucille, you were a placeholder, a sturdy, reliable placeholder. Gregory, consider it severance pay. You're still just the waitress I met at the diner. Lucille, throw her out, and for heaven's sake, don't take the silverware." Then, the cut to the exterior camera, the heavy gates closing. Samantha walking alone into the blinding white snow. Gregory visible in the window, holding a drink, watching her go. The internet exploded. The hashtags changed instantly. Justice for Samantha trended #1 globally within 20 minutes. Boycott Dalton Tech followed, but the most damaging one was placeholder. Women all over the world began sharing their stories of being used and discarded, rallying behind Samantha. Gregory was in the green room of the TV studio, waiting to be congratulated, when his phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Not calls, notifications, thousands of them. He opened Twitter. He saw the video. He saw the comments. He left her to die in the cold. Lucille Dalton is a monster. I hope she takes every penny. The door to the green room opened. Chip Darrow walked in, but the sympathy was gone. You need to leave, Chip said coldly. Now, before the protesters block the exit. But the segment, we're retracting it. We can't be seen supporting a monster, Gregory. You lied to us. Get out. Gregory ran out the back door, pulling his jacket over his head. But the real blow came when he got back to the temporary apartment he was renting, on a weekly rate. Brittany was there, packing her bags. I saw the video, she said, not looking at him. It was edited, Gregory cried. It's out of context. She was crying, Greg. You laughed at her. You and your mother were drinking tea while she walked into a blizzard. Brittany zipped up her suitcase. I can handle a jerk. I can't handle a sociopath. And honestly, I don't want to be the next placeholder. Brittany, wait, I have nothing else. You have your mother, Brittany said, opening the door. You two deserve each other. She slammed the door. Gregory stood in the silence of the cheap apartment. The walls were thin. He could hear the neighbors arguing. He looked at his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked older, smaller. The phone rang again. It was Lucille. Gregory. She sounded small, terrified. The police are here. Police? Why? They have a warrant, Gregory. For the house. For the computers. Lucille began to sob. They're talking about embezzlement. They're saying I spent company money on personal accounts. They're saying you authorized it. Gregory dropped the phone. The freeze was no longer just about money. It was about freedom. Samantha wasn't just taking the company. She was coming for their lives. The courtroom for the final hearing was different this time. It wasn't the sterile family court. It was the superior court, dealing with complex fraud and corporate malfeasance. And it was packed. Samantha sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Henry Cole and a team of 3 other lawyers from Kensington and Wright. She wore navy blue this time, the color of authority. She looked untouchable. Gregory and Lucille sat on the defense side. They looked haggard. They had been forced to use a public defender, a young, overworked man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Grimshaw had sued Gregory for unpaid legal fees and leaked damaging privileged information in the process to save his own skin. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Patterson was back, but this time he was accompanied by a forensic auditor who sat near the witness stand with a stack of binders 2 feet high. We are here to finalize the division of assets and address the counterclaims of fraud, Judge Patterson said. Mr. Cole, you may proceed. Henry Cole stood up. He didn't need theatrics anymore. He had the math. Your Honor, Henry began, the forensic audit of Dalton Tech has revealed a systematic looting of company assets. Over the last 7 years, $3 million was diverted to shell companies registered to Lucille Dalton. The gallery gasped. Lucille shrank into her coat. These funds, Henry continued, were used to purchase jewelry, finance vacations, and cover gambling debts in Atlantic City, all labeled in the company ledger as R&D consultation fees. Gregory stood up, his voice cracking. I didn't know. She told me she had family money. You signed the checks, Mr. Dalton, Henry said, holding up a blown-up image of a check. This is your signature. You authorized every penny. I just signed what she put in front of me, Gregory stammered. It was the ultimate admission of incompetence. The tech genius was nothing more than a puppet. Furthermore, Henry said, turning to the judge, we have established that the core intellectual property of Dalton Tech, the algorithm for the predictive software, was authored entirely by Samantha Kensington Dalton. The patent application filed by Gregory Dalton bears a fraudulent declaration of inventorship. Mr. Henderson, the judge looked at the public defender. Do you have a defense? Mr. Henderson stood up, adjusted his glasses, and sighed. Your Honor, my clients plead incompetence. They argue that they did not understand the complex financial structures. Incompetence is not a defense for fraud, the judge snapped, especially not when you are the CEO of a publicly traded entity. The judge turned to Samantha. Mrs. Dalton, or should I say, Ms. Kensington, you have the leverage here. You hold the debt note. You own the IP. What is your request? The room went silent. This was the moment. Samantha stood up. She walked to the center of the room. She looked at Gregory, who was sweating through his cheap suit. She looked at Lucille, who was weeping silently into a tissue. I don't want them to go to jail, Samantha said softly. Gregory looked up, hope sparking in his eyes. Jail is too easy, Samantha continued, and it costs the taxpayers money. I want them to understand what it means to start over. Truly start over. She turned to the judge. I am calling in the loan from the Artemis Group. Immediate repayment. Since they cannot pay, I am exercising the foreclosure clause. I am taking the company. I am taking the mansion. I am taking the contents of the accounts to satisfy the debt. Granted, the judge said firmly. However, Samantha added, I am not a monster. I will not throw them out in the snow with nothing. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single envelope. She walked over to the defense table and placed it in front of Gregory. What is this? Gregory whispered. It's a deed, Samantha said. To the cabin in upstate New York, the one your father left you before he died. The one you tried to sell last year but couldn't because it was too run down. It was a shack, a rotting hunting cabin with no electricity and a wood stove. It's in your name, Gregory. It's the only thing I didn't touch. It's paid off. It's a roof over your head. You expect us to live in a shack? Lucille shrieked. I am a Dalton. No, Samantha said, cold as ice. You are a debtor, and as of today, you are homeless. You have the cabin, and you have the clothes on your back. And Gregory? He looked at her, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Sam. I'm keeping the dog, she said. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. It wasn't a joke. It was the final severing of ties. The golden retriever, Barnaby, whom Gregory had ignored for years, was the only living thing in that house worth saving. Order, the judge called, hiding a smile. Judgment is entered in favor of the defendant. Dalton Tech is hereby transferred to the control of Samantha Kensington. The remaining assets are seized. Case closed. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Security guards moved forward, not to escort Samantha out, but to escort Gregory and Lucille. They had to hand over their watches, their phones, which were company property, and the keys to the mansion right there in the courtroom. Samantha didn't watch them leave. She turned to Henry Cole. It's done, she said. Not quite, Henry smiled. Mr. Sterling is on line 1. He wants to know if the new owner of Dalton Tech is willing to restart merger negotiations. He's offering 20% more than he offered Gregory. Samantha smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "Tell him I'll meet him, but not at the office. Tell him to meet me at the Bluebird Diner." "The diner where you used to work?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Samantha said, picking up her bag. "I want to remind myself where I came from, and I want to make sure I never forget that the person serving the coffee might just own the place one day." She walked out of the courtroom, the heavy doors swinging open for her. Outside, the sun was shining, the snow was melting, the winter was over. The cabin was exactly as Samantha had described it, a rotting tooth in the jaw of the Adirondacks. For Gregory Dalton, the tech genius who once complained about the thread count of his sheets, reality was now a nightmare of blistered hands and freezing drafts. He spent his days chopping wet wood just to keep the cast-iron stove from dying, while Lucille sat in a moth-eaten armchair wrapped in blankets, staring at the peeling wallpaper in bitter silence. The sharpest blow came 3 months later in the local general store. Gregory, wearing dirty boots and counting crumpled bills for a loaf of discounted bread, glanced up at the small television in the corner. CNBC flashed a headline in gold. "Phoenix Rising, Samantha Kensington on the future of tech." There she was. Samantha looked radiant, sitting in a sleek studio, wearing a blazer that cost more than Gregory's truck. She explained how she had tripled Dalton Tech's valuation in under a year. "The code was always good," she told the interviewer with a cryptic smile. "The company was just suffocated by ego. We stripped that away." Gregory stood frozen in the aisle. He watched as the interviewer congratulated her on her engagement to Michael Sterling. He realized then, standing in the dust of a hardware store, that he had never been the success story. He had been a parasite, and the host had finally cut him loose. Time moved relentlessly. Lucille passed away during the 3rd winter, her heart simply giving out from the weight of her own resentment. Gregory buried her in the cheapest plot available. There were no mourners, no flowers from the Hamptons crowd. Alone and unable to bear the ghosts in the cabin, Gregory sold it and returned to the city. But the name Dalton was toxic. No firm would touch him. Desperation forced him into a uniform. He became a banquet server for a high-end catering company, learning to become invisible to the wealthy people he used to call peers. 5 years after the divorce, fate arranged one final meeting. It was the Innovators of the Decade Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Gregory was assigned to Table 1, the VIP section. He kept his head down, focused on the white tablecloths and crystal glasses, terrified of being recognized. He approached the main guest with a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. "More wine, madam?" he asked, his voice rough from years of silence. "Yes, please." The voice stopped his heart. Gregory's hand trembled, and a single drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine cloth. Panic seized him. He grabbed a napkin, stammering an apology, and looked up. Samantha sat there. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, diamonds glittering at her throat. Beside her sat Michael Sterling, looking at her with adoration. Samantha looked at the waiter. She saw the grey hair, the stooped shoulders, the fraying cuffs of his uniform. "Gregory," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. Michael stiffened. "You know this man, darling." Gregory wanted the floor to swallow him. He braced himself for her revenge. She could have him fired on the spot. She could mock him to the entire table. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blow. "I used to know him," Samantha said, calmly, her voice devoid of malice. "A long time ago." She didn't expose him. She didn't destroy him. She simply looked at him with a pity that hurt worse than hatred. Hate implies you still care. Pity implies you are nothing. I think we are fine for wine, Gregory. Thank you. He nodded, his face burning, and turned to leave. Wait, Samantha said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a bill. She folded it and placed it on his tray. For the service, she said softly. It's a tough job, I know. I used to do it. It was $100. Gregory walked away, navigating through the sea of laughing billionaires, and pushed through the kitchen doors. He went out into the alley and sat on a milk crate. It started to snow, big, wet flakes, just like that day at the mansion. But this time, he was the one in the cold. He looked at the money. He wanted to rip it up to save his pride, but he couldn't. He needed it for rent. Inside the warmth of the gala, Michael took Samantha's hand. Are you okay? Samantha looked at the kitchen doors one last time, closing the chapter on the man who had thrown her away. I'm better than okay, she smiled, stepping onto the dance floor. I'm free. Samantha's story isn't just about revenge, it's about realization. Gregory Dalton thought power came from a bank account, a mansion, and a title. He thought he could discard a human being like a broken toy because he assumed she had no value. But he made the classic mistake of the arrogant. He confused kindness with weakness. Samantha proved that true power isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. When they stripped her of everything, they revealed her steel. When they threw her into the cold, they didn't freeze her heart. They ignited her destiny. In the end, Gregory was left with exactly what he gave. Nothing. And Samantha? She reclaimed the one thing he could never buy, herself. We all have a Gregory in our lives, someone who doubts us, uses us, or thinks we are just placeholders. Let this story be your reminder. Your value is not determined by how someone treats you. It is determined by what you do when the gates lock behind you. Don't just walk away. Rise. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, keep your head high.